Welcome to the Growth Factor, where we aim to spark new thinking by creating light bulb moments for accounting firm leaders on how to deliver transformational growth in your firm. I'm Chris Smith, Chief Growth Officer at QuickFee, and today I have a special guest, Adam Klein. Now, Adam has worked at 2 top 100 firms in a growth role, and he's just an amazing person on here to unpack some of his prior experience and all the things that are going around inside of his head. So, Adam, welcome to the show today, my friend.
Chris, thank you for having me, my friend. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
Yeah. And for everybody that's listening here, Adam, would you mind just sharing some background of your role? So I think there's 2 key things inside of here. You've got amazing experience inside of some great accounting firms, but you didn't grow up inside of the accounting world either. So would you mind just sharing a little bit of background on both of those areas?
Yeah, happy to. I appreciate you asking. So I am, I guess what you would call a career business development sales guy. I've been doing BD, sales, account management, some marketing my entire career. I have been in a number of different industries, but most recently spent the last decade plus in the accounting space. Really fell into it by rather happenstance, but it's been an amazing experience and journey. I've had the privilege and the opportunity to work at 2 top 100 firms, as you mentioned, in growth leadership roles. And I've been part of some pretty amazing growth and innovation and expansion at both of those firms. And so I've really had an opportunity to see some pretty special stuff go on inside those firms and in the profession at large.
Yeah. And how did you make that pivot into accounting from that background? And the reason I ask is I'm not from necessarily within the industry. I've been on the outer edge of the industry. I spent 17 years at Sage working there. I did work inside of the accountants industry for a little bit with a program that we had. But when you make the deeper dive into the accounting profession, it's its own animal and network, right? And relationships. And it's a different way of doing business. And I'm curious, how did you make your way into, because you made your way into some great firms.
Yeah, well, it's funny you asked that. I'll have to tell you a very, very quick story. I got introduced to my first firm, which everyone knows now as Aprio, which at the time, back in 2013, went by its original founding name, a much longer, less sexy name than Aprio. But I got introduced to Aprio back in about 2011, 2012. I was, as I mentioned, working in a different profession at the time. And I had a mentor and friend here. I live in Atlanta. He runs a very successful law firm that he began. He introduced me to what would become Aprio. I wound up speaking to the firm for quite a while, then joining. And I remember him saying to me, before I started at the firm, he said, just remember, this is unlike any other business you've ever been in. And I sort of laughed at him and I said, what are you talking about? Like, this is some little $50 million business. That's how big Aprio was at the time. I said, and I've been inside multi-billion-dollar enterprises. I've called on enterprise level clients. I've done all sorts of stuff. How different or challenging could it be? And then I distinctly remember a year later, he and I had caught up many times, but in particular, a year later, he and I were spending some time together. And I said, wow, were you right? I mean, you were right. This is a different beast altogether. And so it is. I mean, professional services, accounting specifically, the partnership model, it's a different business. It is, it's built on different premises and it has grown and it succeeds for different reasons. So it was quite honestly quite the change and transition for me. But what I quickly realized was it was such a good opportunity to bring a different set of experiences, a different set of skills to a profession that largely, was and still is, not your typical sales driven organizations, right? These are professional, expert driven, firms. And really, I'd say really probably only in the last decade or maybe a little bit more has started to professionalize a bit more when it comes to business development, marketing, growth. So, I've seen an incredible amount of change, but it was certainly a steep learning curve for me about what sales and business development was inside an accounting firm.
Now, when you started at, because Aprio was your first
That's
accounting
correct.
firm that you started at. Um, when you were there, what was your initial thing that you were tasked with? Because growth is such a broad term, right? And sometimes I just even think it's such a broad term that people just kind of like, you know what, like you're just ambitious, you're just trying to be super salesy, you just want to go, and it just kind of gets almost somewhat of a bad rap. So I'm curious, you walk in and you have this growth lens, that you're being targeted with. Where did you start?
Yeah. Great question. So I think it's fair to say, let me comment before I directly answer that question. I mean, I think first and foremost, I came into a firm as a very different type of person and professional, right? I was a
Mhm.
career sales guy inside an organization with, nearly 100% analytical, methodical accountants, some
Mhm.
of whom were very good business developers and rainmakers in a sense, but that certainly was not the nature of the organization. And I was used to coming out of large sales organizations. So it was a very different feel and culture right from the jump. I actually held, for a little bit of context, I held three pretty distinct positions in my time at Aprio. I was there for 8 years. When I first joined the firm, I actually came in a direct business development role. So I had responsibility to grow a specific industry group. Interesting enough,
Mhm.
that industry group was one that I had just come out of. So I had spent 10 years in manufacturing and distribution on the sales side, and I came in to help grow our manufacturing distribution practice. So it was sort of this interesting bridge between a
Yeah.
world that I knew and a world that I didn't know in accounting and what we were selling there. So that's what I did for the first, year or so I was at the firm. After that, I actually helped build and start and build a brand new industry from the ground up and led all the growth efforts within that role. And that was much more expansive. And then I ended my time over several years at Aprio. I led our business development and our strategic alliances and partnerships.
Mhm.
So in that time, I had some very distinct roles and responsibilities. But going back to your very initial question, where I started, what I learned was I had this unique opportunity to take my skill set, my experience, my expertise, and apply it inside a profession, inside the accounting space where, with some exceptions, particularly at much larger firms, certainly wasn't the norm to have professional business developers.
Yeah.
So I think more than anything else, what I like to believe I brought to the table was a different way of looking at growth and at selling that, with the exception of a few people at a fairly good sized firm, typically wasn't the mindset that the organization
Yeah.
had.
Yeah. And the sales lens is part of growth. Have you had any experience on the marketing side as well? And is there just maybe I don't want to get too deep on, tell us everything about your time as a CGO. But as you moved up into growing into that chief growth officer role, what what business units or what kind of things did you have underneath you?
Yeah. So as my career advanced at Aprio, I started working almost from the jump, directly hand in hand with our marketing team, which
Mhm.
again was a very high growth team as the firm grew very fast. So we had an incredible marketing organization, very sophisticated, very expansive. And so I started working with them, really, directly in terms of all the initiatives I was tasked with, right? There was direct marketing activity and responsibility that went along with what I was trying to achieve on the business development side.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd even jumping ahead a little bit, I'd say probably the best thing that happened during my time at Aprio was we actually brought together we had a distinct business development team. We had a distinct marketing team. We brought them together under a centralized growth umbrella. So we had a singular growth organization that had these two primary functions underneath it, but coexisting together.
So, okay, let's have I want to jump into some fun thinking games here, Adam. So imagine imagine you get pulled into a firm who is in, let's put it in the $20 to $40 million annual revenue range. And it's traditional partner model. It's not that they don't have any go-to-market strategy, but let's just say they haven't made it like a predominant thing of having this commercial engine built in. It's more of they've been doing it the way they've been doing it, and referrals have been good and those types of things. Now imagine you go in there and you're like, hey, I want to spark some new thinking around how we're going to make this firm grow significantly without making everybody mad and, having a lot of people leave. And that's change does that to people, right? So that's probably not a fair, thing to put onto this. But if you're in that world, is there anything that comes to mind as kind of like your ground zero of things you would do or bring to how do you start on this growth journey inside of the firm that looks like that?
Yeah, that's a fun scenario, Chris. I like the challenge. I think, and maybe it seems a bit basic, but I'll tell you, in that, if I found myself in that situation, really where I'd start with would in my mind really be the fundamentals, and that fundamental, the primary fundamental being, let's actually decide where we want to go.
Yes.
Right? Let's be intentional about what that growth is going to look like, and that is going to drive directly from, what are the goals and objectives of the organization, right? And you and I both know the profession pretty well. And look, if there's a firm that says, hey, you know what? We're happy being where we are. We don't feel the need to change. We don't need to do anything different or innovatively. I'd say, well, there's your answer right there.
Yeah.
But let's presume, for the sake of this scenario, right, it is an organization that wants to change, and it wants to be more progressive and have that high growth that you mentioned. I think, again, it's starting out with, well, what are the goals? What are the objectives? And then I think it's looking at, okay, what do we already do really well, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does the organization do really well? How do we further capitalize on that? And how do we really leverage it for even greater growth and success? And then it's looking at, okay, well, what don't we do so well, right? Where are some of the gaps and what could we do better, right? And so I think it's really ensuring that those strategies and the tactics that go with them are aligned with the goals and objectives of the organization and are tied into what the organization is capable of. And obviously that's not presuming, well, you could certainly go invest in more resources and different people and maybe you get there at some point, but just starting with what you have. And I think your point about the hesitancy around change, some of the fear, the anxiety around change, it's real and we have to be cognizant of it. So I think what's exciting, particularly in today's day and age, is that firms, two things. Mm-hmm. I think one, firms really over the last decade, in particular over the last 5-6 years, have been doing so much innovative stuff around growth, BD, marketing, sales, that we're not necessarily needed to sort of recreate the wheel and start from scratch, right? We can take what's working out in our profession and adapt that to our particular organization. So I think we can build sort of a faster, more robust strategy based on what we know is already out in the market working to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think part of it is there's also some incredible technology out there that really would allow us to leverage those platforms and tools to start doing some little things a bit better that would put us in that position for that exponential growth. I mean, just even as an example, I think most of us sort of in our roles and our place in our respective firms understand the importance of, look, the referral market is always going to be there, the
Yeah.
inbound, right? Or that waiting for the phone to ring or that email, right? But we all know, with the changing market dynamics, we need to go out there and more aggressively look for business and target business. Well, there are some incredible tools around marketing and within the marketing and sales tech stack that allow us to do that in pretty simple ways that don't require huge lifts from our professionals. Arguably just a little bit more involvement, a little bit more effort can pay really, really exponential dividends.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. And actually, you just made me think of, you and I met almost 2 years ago
Yeah.
at Digital Deep Dive. And one of the things that I love about that event is the sharing of technology,
Yep.
even in just like the side conversations that you have, not even the major presentations. And, I was fortunate enough this past time to have a speaking slot where I was sharing some of the sales technology that we're using inside of QuickFee. And, one of the cool things is to your point, the thing that I was focused on is showing how I'm going to use this in a way, it's not easy to win prospects, but how easy it is to narrow down the lens of where
That's right.
you want to prospect in a very intelligent way in the industries or the profiles of what you want to do and how you get their information and how you can pull them into a digital relationship. And I do think that is an area where I'm excited to see how accounting firms embrace that commercial go-to-market technology. We hear a lot about the customer, technology of performing the service and how they trade documents back and forth and those types of things. But I do think the people who are going to do the selling, there's some investment inside of there that's going to really help take off on, what I would say is playing offense.
Yes.
Another thing you may, go ahead. Yep, you
No,
got it.
I was just going to say, and I think the exciting thing is the types of tools, the technologies, the platforms you and I are talking about, those are applicable both to your professional business developers and marketers, just as they are to our professionals, our CPA partner professionals. A lot of these can be utilized by both of these groups, some in different ways, but these are not just tools and platforms to be utilized by your marketing department or maybe your business developer, right? They can be used by them as well as adapted effectively and fairly simply for your professionals inside the organization.
Yeah. I'll do some sharing of different technology. So if you're listening to this and you're like, would you guys just say some names of the technology you're talking about? I'll share a couple that I think are great to look at. So if you're inside of an accounting firm and you are driving outbound engagements to go and win new business, there's a product called Gong, Gong. It's one of the best solutions out there that can help prospect at scale in a very managed way that's very intelligent. And if you just go and there's nothing in here that's sponsored by Gong, but if you go and check them out, I promise you will fall quickly in love with the capabilities that it can offer to your team. You can take what used to be done by 20 sellers and honestly get it done with a handful with the output that they can do. The second one is LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So when it comes down to prospecting inside of the United States, that's a really big place. And LinkedIn is really good because everybody, when they are moving from job to job, they're going to update their role inside of LinkedIn. So it has really relevant and up-to-date information. But they give you the ability to do great segmentation. So if you want to say, I want this type of business in this industry, and you can get down into micro industries inside of this area. So it could be Atlanta. It'll do the greater Atlanta area. So you don't have to memorize all of the cities that are inside of Atlanta. But it's just these types of things, and all of a sudden you've got that information, you've got this really nice list, and then you take that and then you pull it into Gong to go and execute on the different engagement types that you want. Those are two technologies that come to mind for me. Do you have any that stand out to you that
No,
aren't
man.
those?
How long do we have here
Yes,
on
yes.
this discussion? There's a couple. Sure, I'll name a couple specifically, but even before that, the comment I'd make around the technology is it's expanding so quickly, and there's so much interesting stuff going on that really could dramatically change the way we grow our businesses. And I think one of the real responsibilities of any growth leader inside of a firm, and whether we're talking about a smaller firm, which is a single business developer or a single marketer, or a
Mhm.
larger organization with sophisticated teams, right? It is the responsibility of those, growth professionals to experiment with these technologies and learn what they do and what they're about, and how they can drive greater success. So one I
Yeah.
think of, there's a newer one here over the past couple of years in the market called Prepense, right?
Yes.
And what's really exciting about something like Prepense is it's focused on using, machine learning and using the data firms already have about their clients to help predict buying opportunities for existing clients so that we can all cross sell and upsell better. And I think most of us in the, particularly in the growth leadership side of our profession know that, cross selling is typically a weakness
Yeah.
of many, many firms, right? It is not something we tend to do as well as we could be. And here's a tool and a platform that really adds some firepower to
Yeah.
our ability to do that, in a way that it's a bit more, methodical and structured rather than just, well, let me think of a couple clients. Let me think of some things I can sell them. So I think it's something like Prepense. There's a lot of, again, I can name several
Yeah,
on and
yeah.
on and on. I'll go to maybe a different side. I'll go to a little bit more the marketing side. There's tools. We use a platform called Ready for Social. And what I find really interesting about that, and there's others like this, right? But what they're doing is using AI to help professionals create and customize headline driven content that they can share with their networks on platforms like LinkedIn
Mhm.
about information relevant to their client base. So by industry, by service line, whatever it may be, so that it's allowing that professional in a very automated, simplified way to go out to the market as a thought leader and as someone who has a perspective and a
Yeah.
point of view, and really stay out there in front of their network, right? So it's taking, we hear it all the time. Well, we don't produce more content because we have to write it all by hand and I have to come up with the ideas. Well, and again, we've all heard about, a lot of the good and bad with what
Yeah,
AI is
yeah.
doing with content. But I think as that shapes up and shakes out, we're going to see that tools like that, like a Ready for Social or others, are really going to help us be better thought leaders
Yeah.
in our respective markets.
Yeah. No, that's good. So Prepense, you can find them, I think, at prepense.ai
Yep.
is their
Yep.
website. Tim Keith, their CEO, we both know him really well, but I'm glad you brought Prepense up because when you look at their technology, and maybe future note to have Tim come in
You
and
should.
be on here, because what a great solution he's building and has built, but is in the process of evolving, is taking your customer base today and looking at, here's all of the attributes of what these companies are doing, and they buy these services, and then it says you've got this whole other patch of customers over here that look just like these,
That's right. That's right.
and you're selling $20,000 to them, and these customers you're only selling $8,000 to. So I love tools that just narrow the path to make things a lot easier, so you don't feel like you're just throwing rocks at the wall every time. And that is a tool, that does that really well. So I love that as a share. I think too is it Ready Social? Is that
Ready
the
for
thing?
social.
Ready for Social. I have not looked at Ready for Social, but what I will say is when it comes to a content perspective, even inside of QuickFeed, one of the things we're looking at is content wins eyeballs in the market,
Yep.
like it does. So, and if you're not creating enough content to test out different things of, what's resonating, you're just going to be really slow and you're going to fall behind.
That's right.
So then that's where we have to look at how do we use these tools that are out there today to not create a fake voice that was never us,
Right.
but how do we train those? How do we use those to talk in our voice, but deliver more content that instead of us writing it, we're refining it, So
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
have somebody who might have been responsible for creating the content. Now they're the final reviewer of the content. They're making sure their voice and tone and brand and messaging is on point. But they're now we have all these different channels to go and compete because everybody's like that social media, whether or not we want to admit, is where most of us go and learn about a lot of information. And if we're not showing up there, somebody else is. So I think it's just if you want to stay in the game today and be effective, you do have to look at tools like that.
That's right. Well, and I think, Chris, beyond the technologies themselves, I think, and going back to a little bit
Hmm.
point you and I discussed earlier in our conversation, I think what this is also helping us see is, look, we all know how much change is going on in our profession in so many ways. Private equity, continued merger activity, technology, staffing shortages. I mean, you name it, right? Our business is changing and how we grow our business and we drive success is also changing. So I think what a lot of this technology is helping us realize is we have to think differently about how we're going to continue to drive the growth and success of our firms. And it is the old saying, what got us here won't get us there. And I think when you look at something, just going back for a sec to something like Perpence or Ready for Social or any of the content, right? What we realize, I think our profession has so long been focused on who can go out there and find the new piece of business, the beat my chest. I just got the new logo. And we all know
Hmm.
that's still important, but yet we leave so much business on the table with our existing clients, right? We don't leverage that well enough. And so now we have the opportunity using some of these technologies to really focus on that and take that on a new level. My managing partner at Bennett Thrasher would say, you know what, if we did nothing but sold one or two more services to every client we have, we'd arguably never need to go find new business again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If that was all
Yeah.
we were focused on. And obviously that's not all we want to be focused on, but it really speaks to the fact that there are these huge opportunities out there that to a very large extent, most
Yeah.
firms have not more effectively leveraged.
Yes. And I think it's you're in I'm going to use a software term, your installed base, but your existing customers are the most efficient way to grow.
That's right.
The cost of upselling and cross-selling is so much cheaper than
That's right.
going out and finding a new customer. No,
That's right.
these are
Well, you already have,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I mean, like we already have the trust. We already have the confidence. You already have the working relationship. I mean, so much of the stuff that you have to go overcome in building that
Mhm.
new relationship, you already have.
Yes. All right, so another topic I'm going to bring up is strategy, okay? So inside of growth, instead of just saying I'm just going to work harder and I'm just going to do more and bringing strategy into this. One of the things we talked about this of playing to win. There was another, not to just keep hammering digital deep dive here. I promise we're not, promoting digital deep dive for anything other than it's a really good event. But the last conference we went to, the theme was playing to win. And inside of that book, and I'm going to see if I can memorize, I've memorized this over the past few years, but let's see if I can say it. Strategy. Okay, strategy is a really fun thing to think about, but sometimes we get strategy wrong when it comes to the definition. Before I try and unpack this definition, I'm going to say that the inside of that book, they talk about strategy and then you have a plan. And a plan is something you can control. I'm going to hire this person. I'm going to make an investment in this marketing campaign. It's all things you can control. But a strategy is where you don't have control of it and you have to, it's more of a theory. It's these things that can't be proven in advance that you're going to place bets on. So I love the definition in there. And here we go. Let's see if I can not mess this up. It's an strategy is an integrative set of choice on the playing field of your choice about how to win against uncertainty and competition. It's a theory that can't be proven in advance. You can't make somebody buy your services. You can put together your best strategies to want to pull them in and use them. But unlike a plan where I can say, I'm going to hire this person and I go and do it, it's the squishier part, but it's our best thinking. So when it comes to strategy, how involved have you been in, because inside of an accounting firm, you have your managing partner, you're going to have your partners. If you have a C-suite, you're bringing all of these senior people together. How have you seen strategy work effectively amongst all of those leaders?
Yeah, great question. And if it's okay, I'm going to take one step adjacent for a sec to kind of address what you said. And I want to make this comment and be very clear to the listeners. I love this profession. I love accounting. I love our firms. But I've had the privilege of talking to a lot of very successful, arguably well-known leaders in our profession. And one of the things I have heard consistently over the years, stated in many ways, but kind of boils down to this. The reality is our profession has largely grown and been successful in many ways and in many times in spite of ourselves, right? It has just happened. There, don't get me wrong, been a lot of effort, but it's not always been strategic effort. And it's not always been well planned, right? It's been partially a lot of work accounting firms have traditionally done has been recurring compliance related work that has to happen, right? Yeah. Sort of don't mess it up and you'll get it again next year and the following year and the following year and the following year. And then in times it's been situational. I mean, I think the best example recently is look at the COVID pandemic and everything that came out with PPP and ERC. I mean, firms, well, let's be honest, firms are making money hand over fist by largely nothing we planned or it created. It was completely situational and we were in the right place at the right time. Now we had to do some stuff to build infrastructure and services to make that happen, but we were very fortunate to have that opportunity. Yeah. So with that being said, I think, again, most leaders that I know and respect in the profession, I think would agree that firms have largely not been as strategically focused as they should be. And certainly even maybe where they have been, haven't probably really built and carried out the type of plan they need to continue to grow and be more successful. Yeah. So with all that being said,
that's a good, good backdrop.
The question, I've been fortunate to be part of two strategic growth-oriented firms that have seen and that committed to saying, if we're going to grow and be different, we have to think of things strategically and we have to build strategy and all the corresponding tactics and activities that come with it to go execute on these things we want to do and what we want to accomplish. And what I've seen, not just only in my own firms, Chris, but the other firms I've had the opportunity to work with, colleagues and friends in the profession, is the firms that do, just broadly speaking, strategy the best. They pull in a broad array of expertise and perspectives. They get different facets of the organization involved. And they really seek to build a ambitious growth strategy and plan that they can go execute on, and then give their leaders, oftentimes, in the C-suite, in your operational leaders, the opportunity and the bandwidth, if you would, to go execute on those strategies, on those tactics. But I think I think what you're seeing today, particularly in our profession, is, the firms that are the most forward-looking, that are the most progressive, that are arguably succeeding at the highest level, are probably also the most strategically oriented firms.
Yeah. No, and there's so much to be strategic about right now when
Yeah.
you look at inorganic growth and organic growth, right? Who do we want to merge with? Who do you want to acquire? Who do you want to be acquired by? What do you need to do to, there's so many different outcomes that these different firms want. And not having a strategy is a disservice to what you could be doing there. But there's so much excitement inside of there to be strategic about. Good news is there's just so much to be capitalized on out
Right.
there. So if you're listening, what I would say we're coming to is, are you just running your business, or are you just completing this kind of status quo every day? You're doing the same things, or are you taking these step back moments to say, this is where we are, this is where we want to get to, and here's our best thinking about the different ways that we're going to go and carve out those paths and get to the outcome. And if you're not doing that, it doesn't mean things are bad. You're just missing out on the same amount of hours you could be working, but just getting to a more fun place, more fun outcome. As we wrap up here, Adam, one last thing is, if you could leave one kind of just, let's say, if you could just leave a triggering thought to somebody who's listening, of you're like, man, I really hope you take this away. If there's anything I can just leave behind that I want you to go back into your firm and to think about, what is something that's inside of there that would create that light bulb moment that might get them to reframe their world differently and go take some action on something good.
Yeah, boy, you set me up for a tough one there at the end with just one thing. And when you say triggering, I got thinking, well, I could certainly say some things that would trigger people probably in the
Yes.
wrong way. My radical views on things, but listen, I think, if, again, to your point, leave sort of one final thought there. I think what I would encourage everyone to think about is, you said it before, Chris, this is an incredibly exciting, opportunistic time in our profession. Yeah, there's a lot of challenges. Yes, there's a lot of disruption. And we can either look at that negatively, or we could look at that positively and optimistically and go, wow, with all this change and disruption going on, we really have the opportunity to do something special and different and unique. And so I think what I would encourage folks to think about is, look at this as sort of a blank space, right? With all this
Mhm.
white space out there. And what can we do to take our already, in nearly most cases, right, almost always successful firms by most definitions, right? How do we take our already successful firms and put us in a position to grow and change and innovate and pivot in a way that allow us to be even more successful, right?
Yeah.
How do we go experiment, try some things, look to be different in a way that can really make us the best firm possible, serving our clients, serving the market, serving our own people in the best way possible. And I think the way we get there is by just, being, like we talked about, we try these technologies, be inquisitive, be experimental, be open-minded, be willing to challenge the status quo, really think about the future and really where all that opportunity is.
Yeah. Yeah. So never be satisfied and get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Those two things within your firm, if you focus on doing those over time, not day one, but probably in 30 days and then 90 days and then ongoing, you will see progress that will be very fulfilling, right? It's the change and willingness to do that actually feels good over time. It's more rewarding. Well, Adam, I've really enjoyed having you on here. Great discussion. Thank you so much for taking time to join us here.
Likewise, Chris, I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for having me. Sorry for all my pontificating, but
That's
I
great.
hope some of the perspective insight I shared was helpful, and really enjoyed a fun conversation with you.
Awesome. Well, take care, Adam. Nice talking to you.
Thanks, Chris.